Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show. And with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He has worked for numerous wrestling promotions and has a very inspiring story that he's going to share with us today. Pleased to welcome the one, the only, Timmy Baltimore. Welcome, Timmy, to Wrestling with Heart.
Thank you for having me, Stanley. Appreciate being on the show. I love what you're doing. You got a great message. You give a great platform for what is all too often a mudslinging business. So I'm glad you're bringing some light and positivity to it.
I appreciate it. Well, let's start with this. Are you from Maryland? You've got Baltimore in your name, so I was just curious.
Unfortunately, don't hold it against me. Yes, I am originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I've lived all over, but I am from Baltimore, Maryland, currently in Baltimore, Maryland. It's not just like The Wire, though some places are.
So I actually used to live in Maryland. I grew up there as part of my childhood, so I kind of lived all over the place, and I would visit Baltimore quite frequently. I go by the harbors, see the water, the rivers, just take a drive through the city, all kinds of stuff you can do there. Been to the aquarium, been to several different restaurants there with family and friends, and getting to enjoy the city life. It's pretty an amazing experience.
Yeah, it's a beautiful city. It really is. Like there's it does get a bad rap. There are, like any big metropolis or big city, there are some parts that are rough and a little run down. Poverty's pretty prevalent in some areas, but for the most part, if you don't bother anybody, you don't mind, you mind your business, you go about your day, you're fine. It's the, there's a lot of hyperbole involved in, Baltimore.
Yeah, and it's a great wrestling town too. Very historic.
Absolutely.
And so my first wrestling event I ever attended was in Maryland. And
Cap Center, Landover?
No, actually it was Frederick.
Oh, Frederick,
so,
okay.
WWE came to town one year and got to see, this was like during the first brand split. So it was Monday Night Raw, and Triple H was in the main event that night, wrestling for the World Championship. So it's a night I'll never forget.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget. See, I'm a lot older. So my era was, I was going, like the early, like 90, 91 to the Cap Center. So you may not have been a twinkle in the eye yet. I don't know, Stanley.
No. A few years, give or take. But were you always a fan of wrestling?
So yeah, I guess I can't remember when I first knew that it was a thing. My earliest wrestling memory is actually they used to have these thumb wrestlers. Literally, like it was the big. They had the big. I forget if they were not the Kenner. What were they? The big rubber guys.
Wrestling buddies. Or
yeah. But that era before the ones that were a little like the first WWF ones, the big giant rubber ones, they also released these thumb wrestler ones. And I had this one. I haven't thought about this in a long time. I had a 2-pack. It was Iron Sheik and Hulk Hogan, and I dropped my Iron Sheik in a sewer, and my stepdad went into the sewer and got it for me. That's my earliest wrestling memory. As far as like watching it, I started to watch around like the Mega Powers, and then got really into it in about 90. So like my first pay-per-view that I remember watching was SummerSlam 90, Hogan, Earthquake, Rude, and Warrior in the Cage.
Wow, it's so amazing. I mean, this was a real red hot period for the WWE, rock and wrestling golden era. Getting to watch Hogan and Macho Man and all these guys
It really was such a legendary period in the business. It was mainstream, going on talk shows and cartoons, and everywhere you went, it was everywhere.
It was everywhere. It was like, for being like for kids of that era of born in the 80s, growing up in the 90s, everything was big, everything was bright, everything was colorful, and it was the closest thing to the comic books, to real life superheroes come alive. And I remember um, watching and just being blown away. Like it was like I couldn't fathom that these people existed. I didn't like it was like this is a thing that happens. How does this happen? And what circumstance? So it was really it captivated me pretty early on. And I was one of those kids. I didn't just kind of get into something and then go do something else. I got into it and was
You're a
consumed.
fan.
Yeah,
You were
exactly.
serious.
Yeah.
Um, who were some of your favorites growing up to watch?
Oh boy. So as a young kid, for some reason, and I'm glad that he was because he's a great performer. He was. I was into the Big Boss Man. Didn't want to be a cop. Doesn't make much sense to me. I don't know. It's like something about him appealed to me. Of course, but he always got beat when I went to see him live. So I'll never forget. One time I went to see him in the main event versus Nails in a cage, and it was the final match house show. So you'd think they'd send the people home happy with Boss Man winning in a non-televised event. There were no angles to be run out of it, but Nails won. So I was like, I think back on that now that being in the industry, and I'm going, why the hell did they send us home upset? Like, what? So yeah, so the Boss Man was a big Savage fan. The staples of that period of time, the ones they kind of wanted me to like. I was a pretty easy target.
And I think it's kind of cool to have those gimmicks around, those colorful gimmicks, whether it was, being a police officer or a fireman or um, guy dressed up with all the glitter and the costumes and just the flashiness of some of the guys that would come out. Those are the memorable characters. Those are ones that stick out in a lot of people's mind when you think of pro wrestling.
The, the
Um,
the the line too, like I didn't note it in it being young, right? Because Baltimore was an NWA town. It was a WCW town. And I would, because it was wrestling, I would go to the Baltimore Arena for WCW and NWA, even though it wasn't as prevalent in my life, and it started to become so because of attending. But I it didn't quite understand the division of, and now that I'm grown and older, the division of like why NWA and WCW was so popular with the adults, because there was that realism. Dusty Rhodes was a guy you could have known. Ric Flair could have been your boss. So I understood that, and then Vince McMahon and WWF, of course, they knew what they were doing with the kids, trying to hook them with, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a policeman, I want to. So very smart, just really genius to the DNA strategically of how they did all that.
and I think it's interesting too. You talk about how WCW was very grounded. That realism in wrestling, I think, is very important because to have real life figures, you get they're relatable. The
Yeah.
crowd gets into them like real quick, and then you can tell that later on when ECW came around as well, that just added to, like, with the hardcore and all the blood and all the violence, I mean, really picked up in the 90s. And then that's when the Attitude Era really came about, because you had all these influences and it really took on a life of its own. And here we are now, 20, 25 years later. You see a plethora of wrestling promotions that are kind of still influenced by all this stuff. And I think the realism of the 90s, of the late 80s with the NWA and WCW really helped with that.
Yeah, no doubt. The idea that people want to lose themselves in the moment. They want things to make sense. I know a lot of fans. It's so interesting to see the fan mentality, and like people that are wrestling fans, diehard wrestling fans, want to be worked but don't want to be worked. It's kind of a snake eating its tail kind of scenario. The realism is really where the art and the craft come in. It's that believability. It's that sense of spontaneity. It's the first time they're thinking it and doing it. And then to a lot of wrestling, unfortunately, a lot of some of the performers now, it's almost too pretty. It's almost too acrobatic and rehearsed. There needs to be some grit. There needs to be, not every play in football is a perfect catch. Not every tackle is beautiful. There's screw ups, and that's how it should be to keep that anchor in reality, in my opinion.
You don't always need that glitz and glamour. You can have some of that realistic background and vision of life in there injected into it. And I think those kind of make the best feuds because they're real, they're personable. You've got the crowd that can relate to them. And getting to your story and getting to your fandom and how you knew you wanted to get into the business. Did you know at a young age this is what you wanted to do, or did you fall out of it and come back in?
Sure, yeah. So I was really into it, and then I went through I think everybody goes through not everybody. It's a broad paintbrush stroke. I think a lot of people go in to get out of it for a short period of time, maybe when it's not. People are making fun of you, or you start to get girl crazy, or I did rather, starting to hang out with friends. So these sort of like, when you're a kid becoming an adolescent, it's the last thing you want to do is look like a kid, even if you are still one. So there was a short period of time, sort of getting out of it and then getting back into it. I had always known. I always wanted to do it. I didn't know what it was. My circumstances were such that I've had a spinal cord injury from a car wreck when I was a kid. So I grew up spent many years surgeries, learning to walk again, in and out of hospitals, like pediatric hospitals. So when I was so sedentary, right? I was living in these facilities. Wrestling was the ultimate escape. Here were these larger than life, like I said, real life superheroes, real life supervillains, playing out this morality play that it all made sense to me. It was a dream world to me. And being in a situation where I had so many things that are just taken for granted, I didn't have them. I had them taken away from my injury and had to fight getting them back. But I also had to balance expectations of I'm probably not going to get them back like they were. And that was I don't know if it was tough for sure, but I don't know if I registered it as tough, because as a kid, you're pretty durable, especially if you're going through trauma, which I was going through very significant trauma. You get tough. You only deal with what's in front of you. And the wrestling was like a daydream for me. It was. And I always knew I wanted to do it, but I also wanted to be a Ninja Turtle. So I don't know how realistic my goals were at the time, but yeah. So
it's hard,
right?
Yeah, it's really hard when you have something that you go through something, especially at that young age, and fighting through the pain and trying to get out of it just for a brief period. Just thinking of something else. And yeah, wrestling is a perfect escape because you're drawn into these characters and they are like superheroes. And so you talked about, Macho Man and Boss Man and all these people. really put a smile on people's faces. Sometimes you like to boo them if they get under your skin a little bit, but for an hour or two a week, getting the chance to watch these people on TV and take you out of this moment that you're in, it really is a good feeling to put that aside. And tell me about your first experience working in the wrestling business.
Oh, okay. So I didn't I wasn't an internet buff. I wasn't like a dirt sheet kid, or I didn't really like I watched wrestling. I enjoyed wrestling. I was very into wrestling, but I didn't really get into the backstage stuff or anything like that um, until like I started to get into the business. I didn't know the concept of I figured wrestling schools existed, but it wasn't common knowledge back when I was in a teenager, late '90s, and then I was graduating high school in the year 2000, and I was at a event at the Baltimore Arena. It was a WCW house show, and WCW was pretty hot, but they were starting to taper, but it was still Hogan, Sting on top. And there was a local school called Bone Breakers, and they were handing out flyers out, in front of the event. And one of the promoters for MCW, which is Maryland Championship Wrestling, a company that's still around today, and I still work for. I got handed a flyer, and I started having a dialogue with the promoter. Well, I found out there was this school, so I go, I don't know. I know that it's probably not feasible for me to be a wrestler, but I'm gonna see what it's about. So I went. You think you know, right? You think you know things. You think you get into the industry and you think you know, but you don't know. That first bump will change your life. And I eventually, what I did was I signed up to train as a manager, and I so I graduated high school. I had another back surgery where they put in these rods, and it was bad. They gave me the wrong blood type. I was on life support for 3 weeks, so that was pretty nasty. But once I survived that, thankfully, I started right back at wrestling school. So I was in college, not doing like partying on the weekends in college. I started going to shows and traveling with people. And so it took me about a year and a half of being there every day before somebody finally gave me an opportunity. And keep in mind here, Stanley, I was walk with a cane and a limp. I didn't know I wasn't a valuable performer. So to get a shot in the wrestling industry, it was going to take some luck and some perseverance. And my first real opportunities started coming because MCW had its normal indie guys, but then there were people that came through there. And three in particular were Joey Matthews, Joey Mercury, Christian York, and Mickey James. And I was fortunate enough that for whatever reason, I looked and I go, those are the cool kids. I need to get in with them. That's who I need to hang around, because at that point, I know Joey was 21 and he had already been hired in WCW, fired from WCW, hired in ECW, left ECW, hired by WWE, fired by WWE before 21. So I go, these guys are doing it. Like, I need to figure that out. And for to use a wrestling term, I got over with them, and they kind of took me on as a younger brother. And thank God, because I don't think I ever would have gotten out of Baltimore. I don't think I would have ever gotten out of the Maryland scene if I hadn't. And they really were doing it. So my first, there was some bad experiences early on. Like there was some women's organization that was Women's Extreme Wrestling. It was terrible. I was a first steady booking, but it was not something I would show my parents back then. They were like, "How's the wrestling going?" I was like, but like I remember the first time I started to really learn, and something like I was like, "Oh, I'm learning how to really do this." Was back then there weren't many women's matches. There weren't many. It's not like it is now, where there's so many qualified, talented female wrestlers. There were only like a select handful back then, especially in the Mid-Atlantic Northeast. And Mickie James was one of them, and she there was a young lady named Persephone. Her real name was Bobby Joe. She was another. So they used to get booked on different promotions as the women's match. That was the women's match. They were like kind of an act, and they went around different bookings. And Mickie threw me in the mix to manage her opponent, Persephone, Bobby Joe, as a heel. So as the heel manager, and that's where that was so important to me to learn, because eventually becoming a commentator and a talking head, and then creatively and producing and things like that. I think, yeah, absolutely. If I hadn't been in the guardrail, in matches, taking bumps, learning what this thing was, I would not have been nearly as prepared or as sharp. So that was kind of my first go at it.
Do you recall any pieces of advice that Mickie James or Joey Mercury taught you that you still recall?
Oh,
still
yeah.
apply to you today?
Sure, man. I still get advice from them. But like the one of the first things Joey told me. So Joey Mercury, Joey Matthews is one of the more brilliant minds in professional wrestling. It's not it's known inside the industry. And you get where, if you've done what he's done, gotten as far as he has, and you've gone through as much as he has, you're gonna have people that love you, people that hate you, is what it is, right? I happen to really value him, and he was very smart, so smart at the psychology and the psychological component. One of the first things he told me was that, this thing, because so many people get into it as a dream, like I did. You're doe-eyed. You're, oh wow, you think everybody's cool, everybody's your friend. And he said to me, he goes, see things for how they are. Always see things for how they are. And I never forgot that. So that applies in the sense that if you're in this industry, you're going to meet your heroes, right? You're going to meet people you grew up with. These people become your peers. Just because you grew up idolizing them does not necessarily make them people that you need to subscribe to everything they say, because they're just as crazy. They're maybe crazier than most of them. So, and I'm not saying like they're the veterans or somebody you should listen to. They have invaluable experience. They can tell you they've made the mistakes, they've made the money, they've done it. They've rode up and down the roads. But there are certain scenarios where when you're new, you're easily manipulated. You're easily gotten over upon. And it's one of those pieces of advice I'll never forget, because it always allowed me to go, wait a minute. Like if something didn't seem right, like, hold on a second. Like, this doesn't seem right. And it probably isn't. So that was a great piece of advice. And that was wrestling business life advice. But like, as far as like performance and working, God, there's so many. Too many probably to recollect as far as like performance-based advice, but so much like psychology that I learned from them. And knowing I'll put it to you this way, even if you're not being a wrestler, I've worked day in and day out with talent at every level of the industry for the past almost 25 years. And you need to know how wrestlers think. You need to know how the talent thinks if you want to be in this business and want to be impactful. So that's the best thing. That's the most valuable lesson I really learned, was just doing it, being in the mix, being in the trenches, so to speak.
Yeah. And you've had a decorated career working in different facets and different positions. Now you got to work in developmental too. WWE developmental, OVW. What was that experience like?
It was great. So I did the Indies in the Northeast. Well, I was in college till about 2000. So it was from like 2000 to 2005, and was mostly managing, getting in work. If you can't bump and feed, if you can't, you know, be a draw or a main event wrestler, you got to be able to do everything else. And I that was another piece of advice that I learned early on from Joey and Mickey, and I was able to apply what I had learned once Mickey got signed to WWE and went to OVW. I was kind of on my own, and I was fine with that because I had made the connections at that point. So I was able to work anywhere from slow month would be 5 times a month, which is not great, but up to 10 times a month as a indie nobody. And after college, I had a choice between law school and moving to OVW on my own dime, no contract, no guarantees, nothing. And I took a risk and I went. And it was absolutely, I would not. It's like when I decided to get in the car and ride around with Joey and Christian and Mickey, like that changed the trajectory. Going to OVW absolutely changed the trajectory. I showed up, and the only people I knew, obviously, were Joey was down there starting M&M. He had moved on his own dime and got signed. Mickey was on a developmental deal, and I'd known a few other people, but not really to that extent. And so I started showing up and finally met Danny Davis, and I said, "Hey, Mr. Davis, I'm here." Like, I'm here. Hi. Yeah. No, he didn't give a shit. Excuse my language. He didn't give a crap. But he was like, well, what can you do? And I was like, I was like, well, I manage. And he's like, you're not doing a damn physical thing in my ring. And I was like, okay, that's out. And he was wise to say that. So I was like, well, I can announce, I can commentate. I couldn't do that. I was lying. And, but he was like, okay, you can ring announce, the amateur shows. So Rip Rogers had a non-contract class. They called it the amateur show. So my first thing that I did when I got to call this play-by-play, this show, was I retitled it without asking the Future Talent Showcase. And they yoked me up afterwards. They're like, what the hell? Why did you rename it? And I go, who's paying to see amateurs? And right then, I think I got over with them. I think that made them go, oh, okay, he may get it. So then I started to do, I saw that there was sort of a void for that there was a vacuum for that position. Dean Hill was there, Kenny Bolin was there, Al Snow was doing color, but as far as like, OVW was running 5 times a week. There was OVW TV Wednesday, then Rip Rogers started running Derby City Wrestling TV on Thursdays. There was Friday house shows, Saturday house shows, Sunday house shows. And when I say house shows, like a live event around the Kentuckiana area. And I saw that, there wasn't an announcer going to those. So I said, boom, I went right for it. So I became the live events MC, announcer, commentator, playing music, doing all that stuff. Then I started doing the voiceovers for OVW TV commercials. What that did was get me in the office with Danny Davis every Wednesday, right, for about an hour, which was advantageous because he got to know me. Then a good piece of advice that I taught myself was whenever I did something well on an opportunity, if I got an opportunity and I did well and somebody told me I did well, I'd ask for more opportunity. And that paid off. So I started as the voiceover guy, the commentator for the Rip Rogers shows, the Future Talent Showcase. I then asked to start calling the dark matches. OVW TV had these matches before TV and after they taped TV. Those went straight to the WWE office. So I started doing play-by-play on those. Then I became the ring announcer on OVW TV. Then I was a backstage correspondent and the ring announcer on OVW TV because I was short. There was no other short announcers. Dean Hill's about 6'3", 6'4". And he was a police officer. He had a life outside of this. I was just this. And then I earned my way, became the first third man at the booth, at the desk rather, on OVW TV between Kenny and Dean. And that was huge at the time for me. That was the goal, to, get my voice and get in front of WWE. And I started attending the Al Snow's contract class without a contract, especially on promo days. I became valuable for promo day because they needed a mean gene. They needed someone small to interview on. So I started creating value. And as I was creating value and getting other people over, I was getting over by getting other people over. And it took me 2.5 years. And it took me 2 years before WWE brought me up to audition me I got auditioned for the ECW backstage interviewer. And they brought me up for about 7 weeks to every Raw and SmackDown. And then they didn't call me for 6 months. and then I got the call in 2008, right after they left OVW to go to FCW and report there as Dusty Rhodes' assistant.
So you were part of OVW for 3 years.
2.5 years, yeah.
2.5 years, yeah. Well, tell me about when you're announcing, when you're doing the commentary, do you feel it's easier to be in a 3-man booth or a 2-man booth?
At this point, I can roll with whatever. What do I prefer? It depends on who's in the booth. It's funny when you start doing commentary. Like, commentary is one of those things. I feel like you either have it or you don't. It takes a long time to get good, very good. And I'm not saying there was a period where I was probably calling more matches than anyone in the wrestling business in about 2006, 2007. There's a period there. I was calling, I'm nearly certain, more matches than anyone else in the wrestling business. I'm talking, 8 matches on 8 to 10 matches on Wednesday, 8 matches Thursday, 8 matches Friday, 8 matches Saturday, 8 matches Sunday. Then practice Mondays, promo days Tuesdays, early TV meeting Wednesday, TV Wednesday night. It was wrestling.
It was a grind.
It was a grind. It was cool though, because that was what you wanted to do. You wanted to live like a wrestler. You wanted to, and you can't help but get good if you apply yourself. It's just reps. It's like anything that you want to do. The more times you do this show, Stanley, the better you get. And so as far as the 2-man, 3-man booth, I started, you start kind of like imitating people when you start out, and then you start to find your own voice. And once you find your own voice, then you become kind of selfish. And like, I look back on like being with Kenny and Dean, and like, they used to call me Steamroller because I would literally, like, I thought I had to fight for it. Like, I had to take it. And that wasn't always necessarily the case. I think I was in a super competitive mindset at that time. As I've gotten older and become comfortable, it becomes more about the broadcast and lifting everybody. You know what I mean? As the play-by-play, you want your color guy to be great. If you have a third man who's running, analysis like a Mike Tenay, you want him to be great. So it kind of, I guess, if I had a gun to my head, it's like, which one do you want? I go 2-man, but I can roll with anything, and I think I can work to elevate the entire broadcast and show.
There's a lot that goes into a huge production like a professional wrestling event because there's so much going on, a lot of moving parts. And you also got to work alongside Dusty Rhodes. What was it like being around him?
Terrible. No, it's great. Yeah, I got to sit in a room with Dusty Rhodes for 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week for over a year. Until I gave my notice after about a year and a half. I can't remember. About a year and a half. I was Dusty's guy though. I was really, really lucky. I mean, you can't beat it, right? Like, I had become very close with Cody while we were in OVW. He arrived his rookie year, and I was just kind of getting started in OVW, and he and I became real close. And then through that, I started, kind of attended family events, weddings, things like that. And Dusty was being brought back into the fray of WWE after his DVD was released, and they were closing. WWE was closing their developmental contract out with OVW, and John Laurinaitis wanted to have his own thing started in Tampa, and they thought that would attract college athletes more than Louisville, and they were right. So it was a more attractive option to them, and they moved to Tampa, and they had their coaches in the sense of the in-ring and Dr. Tom. Steve Kern it was his building. Like OVW was Danny Davis's, FCW was Steve Kern's. They had Norman Smiley, Billy Kidman, and then Dusty was going to be the character, the promo guy, the production, and he needed, as Cody put it, a junior booker, which I thought was always a really cool way to put it. But it was his assistant, and it was an honor, man. Like, I got to sit with one of, if there's a better mind in the industry, I don't know it. And in my opinion, the greatest orator in professional wrestling history is American Dream Dusty Rhodes. So it was wild. It was great. It was awesome. It was, you spend that much time with somebody and they're your boss and you report directly to him. He wasn't like, he was the coolest boss, he was there were good days and bad, but he was real happy with me for the most part. I don't remember ever, messing up too bad. But the things you'd learn and just cutting up with someone like that and just having them give you their trust. It was something I really, I look back on. At the time, I was really honored, but I look back being older and a little wiser now, and it holds a special place in my heart that I was trusted with a lot of his knowledge and daily stuff. So it was real cool.
And it's amazing too how you hear stories about Dusty being really giving and generous and always appreciated working with young talent. And especially when you hear how he was very instrumental with coming up with some of the early gimmicks of the people down in NXT in the early days. His legacy, I feel like, outside of the in-ring product in his career in the ring, I think outside of the ring was just as important, because he really fostered that foundation of helping the young talent. And as we know it today, you see people like Roman Reigns, and Seth Rollins, and even working with people like Bray Wyatt, helping be instrumental with the early workings of that character. I mean,
Dusty's kids is what they called themselves. Yeah, like those I was there for day one of those promo classes with Dream in FCW before it turned to NXT. So when I was there, it was the guys that were on top were Dolph Ziggler, Nick Nemeth, Jake Hager, or Jack Swagger, Matt Sydal, Evan Bourne, Sean Spears, Ted DiBiase Jr., Alpha Jr. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few. TJ Wilson, just killers in there, man. Just monsters, so talented. And we Eddie Colon, I don't want to forget Primo Colon was awesome. Eric Escobar. But what we would do is like the promo classes were like it was a big deal. It was a big deal to Sheamus as well. It was a big deal to want to perform for Dusty, to get that nod and have him go, that's a promo. Because I learned so much about what I learned from Dream as far as the business side is how to produce, talk to, communicate, direct, get the best out of talent in a promo performance scenario. He knew how to talk to and reach into talent, and when they thought they had nothing, pull something out of them. It was a sight to behold. It was like a special power. It was crazy, dude.
And you mentioned earlier you got to be around Cody Rhodes back in the day. It's amazing how he's gotten to the top of the mountain. Really. WWE champion. You got to feel happy when you see the people that you worked with for so long get to that level.
Yeah, for sure. He so I still talk with him. It's like they did All In, him and the Young Bucks. He was kind enough to, because I called his first match. His first match was with Pat Buck in Corydon, Indiana, and I did commentary for that. And so he called me when they did All In, and I was able, I got to sit at the desk and be guest commentator for Cody Rhodes versus Nick Aldis for the NWA Heavyweight Championship, and that was a crazy experience. That was a great. If you look back, I think All In, that first one's going to go down as one of them. It was one of the most influential, impactful wrestling events of the quarter century. It changed things. So to be a part of that and to be a part of one of the marquee matches and to look and at the desk and go, well, here's Ian Riccaboni and there's Excalibur. And I go, well, Ian's play-by-play, Excalibur's color, but also analysis. I can't be play-by-play, I can't be color. So what am I here for? And I had to determine that. And thankfully I had experiences and I go, I'm here for the personal touch. That's what I'm here for. So that's what I tried to bring to that broadcast. Cody is somebody who there used to be a car of us that would go to these house shows, the OVW live events. And I believe for a while it was Deuce and Domino and myself and Cody and the guy named Jack Bull. Joey was actually in the mix there for a while. And one time we were riding back from some town and this conversation came up. This is his rookie year. Cody's probably had 2 or 3 matches maybe. And somebody had said well, where are you going to be in 5 years? Where are you going to be in 10 years? And Cody was like, I'm going to be the biggest name in the industry. And everybody in the car was, ah! And I remember I thought I believe him. I believe him. The way he said it and the way he carried himself and the way he approached wrestling, he was light years ahead of almost everyone intellectually, how he saw it. And
very forward thinking.
Right. And how he maneuvered within it. And you knew he was going to be something big when things got tough on him and he left WWE and bet on himself. And then we all know the entire story is wrestling lore now. There was always a sense that this thing is going to work out one way or another. And even when he was in AEW, I knew in my heart, he's WWE. He's tailored for the wrestling business, but with how he presents himself and the type of star and the level he wants to be on and is on now, wanted to be on rather, and is on now currently, you knew that was the place and he was going to get there, and he sure did.
Yeah, I mean,
He sure
you got to be a part of that journey, witness his rise. Now, outside of OVW and WWE, you got to go back to Maryland Championship Wrestling. You're now currently a part of the organization. Talk to me about what you currently do and the endeavors that you're involved in there. I mean, I'm sure you guys do a lot of charity work and fundraisers.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, MCW, they run the Toys for Tots every Christmas. They, you know, we do different functions and comp tickets to some special needs people, things like that. And that's important to me too, because and you know, having a disability and being physically disabled and severely physically disabled or severe disability and injury, you know, my outlook is a little different. My I've been told that this thing would hold me back. I've been told that I wasn't made for this because of my circumstances, but I didn't let my extraordinary circumstances prevent an extraordinary existence. So I knew if my body wasn't going to do it, my brain better be able to, and my mouth, my verbal acumen better be on point, and my mentality and my thinking and my psychology better be pretty sharp. So with MCW now, I do commentary and play-by-play there, and basically that oversee that, but also some of the promo production for some of the more the bigger matches and important promos, and helping the some of the younger guys. There's a school where they have a school at the R.J. Meyer Arena in Joppa, Maryland, which is just north of Baltimore. So I'm over there once or twice a week. So you know, and they're running. I think 2025. It's something like 30 shows, so it's substantial for an indie. So yeah, so that's and I help creatively, I guess you could say there, and the logistics of, you know, who's fighting who. You know
Yeah,
what
I mean, you're involved in several different capacities. Was there a particular fundraiser or event that you got to help out with that was heartwarming?
So I always it's important to me to it's important to me to I really want I want there to be, and it's to have a professional wrestler that's a PWD, persons with disabilities, part of that community. I know there are a lot of very talented ones. There's Zach Gowen, there's Greg Irons, there's a guy named Michael Hayes and not Freebird. He was an OVW for a long time, and he was a veteran amputee, and he was just I thought he was going to be it. He was a killer, man, because he was that guy. Like the story very much was like, look, you know, you may be able to outrun him, but if he gets a hold of you, he's taking a limb home, that kind of thing. And I think you could really build a character and a performer from that, because if you go and look into the crowd of any wrestling event, there are so many individuals with special needs and disabilities. And speaking from experience, that it's a difficult, everything that is presented in life when you have something that is, you know, if you're special needs or severe disability, is more difficult, everything. And to be able to provide some sort of respite or some sort of joy or a moment where that's not at the forefront of their mind. Or if they're able to look at me and I'm not wrestling, but if they see I'm involved and I'm doing those things, and maybe that plants a seed that you can find your thing. If it's not wrestling, you can still find your thing, and you can still make anything happen. You can. It's possible. It's not. You can be dealt a really bad hand. It's how you play the cards that makes you the person you are, and it's why I do my show. LiMPin Ain't Easy is because I have a story, but I know through my adversity and what I had to go through in the wrestling business that everybody has a story, not everybody has a voice, right? So, talking to the various wrestling stars about what they've had to confront, what they've had to go through, what they've been obstacles they've had to overcome and endure, like you said earlier. And I think one of the reasons you do this show is because it's relatable. People can maybe hear their story in the voice of somebody they watch on TV, and that's huge.
And also, you're paying it forward to the next generation, the people that you're helping. I mean, I think it's amazing how in recent years, especially, the diversity of pro wrestlers come in all shapes and sizes and backgrounds, and the representation is important because you see it's white people, black people, LGBTQ, people with
Right.
different issues in their life. People from all shapes, colors, backgrounds. They've all got a dream, and they want to pursue it. And I think it's very, to me, I think it's amazing, and it's wonderful to see how inclusive pro wrestling has gotten and will continue to be.
Yeah, I do have to say that, and there's another disabled. He has a disability. He's hearing impaired, and it's not the guy in NXT. It's a guy named Spencer Slade, wrestles for MCW and NWA. He's a star. This kid's a star. But wrestling is for everybody, but everybody can't play. And here's what I mean by that: because everybody's invited, but it takes a special kind of person to get through it. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, big, small, disabled, able-bodied, LGBTQ, straight. It doesn't matter. But just because of that, though, that's not going to be enough to get you into the dance. You got to have something to offer. You got to have something that people want to pay to see. You got to have that it factor. You got to have something that makes you box office, that makes you special in the sense that it is your dream and you want to do it, right? But at the end of the day, once you get into this thing, it becomes a business, and we are serving the audience. You know what I mean? It stops becoming so much about our dream and becomes about how can we best present something to the audience that they will enjoy, that they will carry forward and to pass on to their kids and have an experience and love this thing called wrestling, love the art and enterprise of sports entertainment and professional wrestling. So
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. And so it's transcended generations, and over time you see the evolution of the business. 80s, 90s, 70s, today. I mean, it's just over time you've seen wrestling change. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes in the last 20 or so years, 25 years since you've been in the business.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yes, very much so. So when I got in, it was sort of still a pirate ship. There's a lot of a little more sense of danger, a little crazier, but it was even crazier before then. So it's kind of tempered. I'll be honest. There's a little bit I miss about that. It's something that attracted me to the business. A lot of people hear about the old timers and the outlaws, raising hell, shooting road signs riding down the road, and that seems crazy and toxic. I kind of thought that, like that was like, oh, that's so cool. you know. So I mean, as you get older, obviously that's not a way to be. But as you know, as far as like, I think wrestling is at its best when there is that sense of, is this real? Is this? There's a little bit of danger, because when people know the whole thing, when you turn on the lights and show the monster under the lights on a steady shot, it stops being scary. It stops being special. So there still needs, when if the idea of how to work people and the work has changed, we still need to keep some of that alive. We can appreciate the performance. We can talk about it in a performance basis, but we still need to, we can't necessarily make them believe, but we can make them, while they're watching, forget for a while. And I think that's really important to keep that up.
What has been your favorite part about the current era of professional wrestling?
Oh boy. I guess I have enjoyed that, the scale of things, the sense of occasion. Almost everything feels like a big deal. I also kind of, I do like that, we're not, especially in WWE now, I know they don't give everything all at once, right? These things are, there's a pace to some of the storytelling now that I really, I think is smart. Because I see it from a different aspect, right? I don't necessarily go, I'm a fan of that. That's awesome. I go, that's smart. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So,
delayed gratification.
Right. I like that. What do I miss the most? I guess you need to ask that, but I'll tell you, like, I guess I miss, I miss that sense of spontaneity. I miss that sense of danger. I miss, if you watch old Mid-Atlantic and wrestling from the 80s and stuff, there was just a sense to it that there was a real struggle going on. There was some real violence and something happening, some chaos. And so I think there's a little too much polish, maybe a little too much blatant cooperation. And I think we could sacrifice a little bit of that, keep the athleticism, but make it just a little less Cirque du Soleil, and put a little more struggle into it. But that's just my opinion.
Well, I think it's good to have a happy medium and a variety of different tastes. And I think it's amazing that we have all sorts of alternatives around that appeases different audiences and groups of people that favor certain things over another.
That's my favorite part. I'm sorry, let me interrupt. That's my favorite part. We have access to it all, right?
Yes.
You can see, you don't have, back in the day, you had to wait till next week. And if you missed it, you missed it. It was over. We have access to this. We can relive it anytime. That's my favorite part. Stanley, sorry, I got excited there.
No worries. It's all good. You had brought it up earlier, but I want to talk to you about your podcast, LiMPin Ain't Easy. What made you decide to start up the podcast?
So I've had this idea for a while, and I didn't quite. It seemed daunting. I didn't know it was a good idea, but starting a podcast is and learning. I wasn't a big social media guy. I wasn't savvy on YouTube, but I had this idea for a while of talking to all the relationships I've made and the connections I've made that. Speaking to them, because of my adversity, I can be sort of an authority on what it is to go through things and come out on the other side intact, having survived, changed for sure, but ultimately stronger. And I know from being around these individuals that everybody's gone through their own kind of personal hell of sorts. And I thought that would be we don't really think about that. We see these superstars, these athletes, these athlete entertainers on television at their height, and we don't think about the goalposts they had that constantly were moving, the wars and battles they had to go through, the personal issues they had to tackle. And what I decided to do, wrestling is very much take a person and present them in a way that is larger than life, that is not your next door neighbor. Make them as big as possible, as grandiose, charismatic as possible. And I said, what if we take that and we flip it upside down? We take these grandiose people and we make them real and talk about their real stuff, so that people at home who think that stars and people that are living these lives don't go through these things, they actually do, and they can possibly again hear their story, hopefully in their favorite or least favorite star's voice. So it's kind of like I thought, bring where the real struggle to the make-believe world of wrestling. And yeah, that's how it occurred to me. And people started going, why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you doing that? I said, why am I not doing that? And so I just, at some point, you know this well, Stanley, you just got to go. You just got to start doing it. And luckily I built up enough social currency and goodwill and credit in my relationships, and because wrestling is a business of relationships, rapport, and reputation, and I had kept all three of those pretty damn good. And I was able to call on people who I had helped out along the way or knew along the way, and so it's coming along, and just finally got approved to start talking to some WWE contracted superstars, which isn't the easiest thing. Thank you, brother. It's not. So it's like, it was trying to like you have spread positivity, found in what is can be a very bitter and embittered and industry when you're in it, and showbiz, and feels unforgiving at times. You are able to pull out the silver lining and the positive parts of it, Stanley. I think you do a great job doing that.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that, and I think in step with you gotta have something that makes you different, right? So because everybody, there's a lot of shows. We're all competing for that piece of attention and that piece of the marketplace. So what are you doing that makes you different? How are you standing out? How are you worth the audience's time? And that's the constant thing we're trying to obtain. And I said to somebody, I said recently, like, oh man, this YouTube crap and the social media, it's like hitting a moving target. And he said to me, he goes, no, you are the target. And I said, oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to have that niche, those special niches that people not necessarily are really talking about. When you think about pro wrestling and the different topics that you can talk about, because there's so many podcasts. So it's important to find what's important to you and focus on that and build on that. So you do a pretty good job yourself of being able to find that uniqueness.
Oh, stop. I appreciate that. Yeah, it doesn't hurt also that I've had these relationships and know them, right? So I speak the language, you know what I mean? So I can sit there and go, oh man, that car ride was hell, or what, so there is an advantage to having done it. There's not like I've cried with them, I've laughed with them, I've been through the deal with them. So there's I'm fortunate in that sense. But I didn't exactly get it on the ground floor. It started pretty late, but what do you do, man? It's like they say, well, why would I go back to school if I'm going to be 50 years old? It's like, you're going to be 50 anyway.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
might as well do it.
well, before we wrap things up here, we're talking about paying it forward, giving back, you sharing your story, Timmy. Why do you feel passionate about giving back to the community?
Because if you want to keep it, you got to give it away. It's that simple. I think that the human condition is such, like, when you go through some trauma, when you go through suffering, you want to find meaning in it. You don't want to think. We don't want to believe that we go through all this hell just because, just so hold on, like my spine is broken in 10 places just because, right? Like, no. Okay, so what's the meaning? How can I find meaning in that? Well, I can hopefully have somebody who is going through something similar, and going through the things that I've been able to get through, survive. It's never done. You're always enduring it, but it's how you carry it. If my story or my experience is able to give somebody else some perspective, whether they're going through something similar or they have what you find being disabled is people that have a family member or are themselves seem to understand, but most people aren't affected by it. So they have it's not that they don't have empathy for it or sympathy, they're just oblivious, right? And if I can bring some awareness and perspective to those individuals as well, then you know what? Like, all the stuff, the mountain of crap, the years and endless drama, heartache, headache, it'll have meant something. So that's why it's important. It's a little selfish because I want it to mean something.
Well, you're doing people a good service by sharing your story with others, just like you are with me, and helping others that are going through a hard time in their life. So kudos to you for being able to do it.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that. Kudos
Absolutely.
to you as well.
Thank you. Timmy, this has been wonderful getting the chance to speak with you. I want to say thank you for coming on to Wrestling with Heart. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. Where can people find out more about you and about your podcast?
So I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram. I'm sure whatever else is going to come out next, I'll probably be on that at the handle at Timmy Baltimore. You can also go on YouTube, search LiMPin Ain't Easy. That's LiMPin. AiNT, no apostrophe, easy with Timmy Baltimore. You can find me on YouTube and on podcast platforms, and new episodes drop every Wednesday. So check us out.
All right. Timmy, thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Thanks, Stanley. You're the man, dude. I appreciate you.
All right. Take care.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.